A Werewolf Shifter Romance by Maple. Chapter 1. The Dream. The dream came again. Elara was standing in a field washed silver by moonlight. The air smelled of wet earth and pine. Far away between the trees, two blurred figures, one tall, one slender, stood hand in hand. She couldn't see their faces, but something in her chest ached as if she knew them. When she tried to step closer, a low growl rolled from the darkness. From between the trees, a wolf emerged, its coat white as frost, its eyes burning gold. It began to move toward her, silent at first, then faster, until the sound of its paws became thunder in her ears. She tried to run, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The figures turned away, fading like smoke, and the wolf leapt towards her. Elara jolted awake, a sharp gasp cutting through the air. Her alarm clock screamed beside her, red numbers flashing 6 a.m. She pressed a hand to her chest, trying to steady the trembling there. The dream clung to her like fog, strange, heavy, refusing to fade. She sat up slowly, brushing hair from her face. "Just a dream," she whispered, though her pulse still raced. Today wasn't the day to get lost in shadows. Today was important. She swung her legs off the bed and stretched until the stiffness left her limbs. Sunlight slid through the thin curtains, glinting off the framed photo on her dresser. Her mother's smiling face beside her Uncle Alex, his arm around her younger self. The sight always filled her with warmth and guilt in equal measure. Downstairs, voices and clattering pans drifted up. She could smell toast, coffee, something sweet, Bella's pancakes. Elara showered quickly, the cold water biting enough to wake her fully. She dressed carefully, a crisp blouse she'd ironed the night before. Neat trousers, the modest heels that made her feel a little taller, a little stronger. In the mirror, she studied herself. 21, composed, trying not to look nervous. "You've got this," she told her reflection. Her voice didn't sound convinced, but it was better than silence. When she walked into the kitchen, Alex was flipping pancakes with theatrical seriousness, while Bella, his wife, rolled her eyes with a smile. "Morning, sunshine," Alex said. "Big day, huh?" Elara nodded, forcing a smile. "Interview day." Bella handed her a mug of tea before she could ask. "Drink this first. You'll need the calm. You look lovely, by the way." "Thank you." Elara took a sip, the warmth settling in her stomach. Alex leaned against the counter, arms folded. "Blackwell Industries," he said, testing the sound of it. "One of the biggest names in the country. They'd be lucky to have you." Elara laughed softly. "Let's hope they think so too." Bella's expression softened. "You've worked so hard for this, Elara. Whatever happens, we're proud of you." That word, proud, always struck something deep. They said it often, and she wanted to believe it. Yet part of her always wondered if they said it to hide pity. They had taken her in when her mother died, bringing her into the world, raised her as their own while juggling jobs and their own son. They never complained, never let her feel unwanted, but she did. Sometimes, she set her mug down and smiled at Bella. "I'll make you both proud. I promise." Bella reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You already have." Alex cleared his throat, pretending to wipe at his eye. "Enough of this sappy stuff. Eat before you go fainting. In that fancy office." Elara laughed, the sound lighter than she felt. Outside, the morning air was cool and clear. The street was just waking. Cars starting, neighbors calling greetings, birds perched on telephone wires. She walked toward the bus stop, heels clicking softly against the pavement. Her mind wandered as the city stretched around her. She thought of Alex and Bella, of their son Liam, her brother and everything but blood, and of how much they'd given her. Getting this job meant more than income. It meant freedom, repayment, peace. Blackwell Industries. Just the name sounded untouchable. She rehearsed answers in her head. "Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Why do you want to work here?" She smiled nervously at the thought of sitting before an interviewer in that towering glass building. Lost in thought, she barely noticed the traffic light change. A horn blared. Elara looked up just in time to see a sleek black car surging toward the crosswalk. She stumbled backward, heart leaping into her throat. The car screeched to a halt, mere inches from her knees. Gasps, shouts, For a moment, everything went still except the wild rush of her pulse. Then the car door opened and 3 men stepped out. The first was clearly the driver, pale and shaken. The second, a man in a dark suit, muttering about schedules. But the third commanded attention without trying. He was tall, maybe 24, with dark hair and eyes that caught the sunlight in flashes of gold. His expression was composed, unreadable. Yet there was something in his stance, an authority that quieted the street around him. Elara's breath caught. I'm so sorry, she stammered, stepping forward. I wasn't watching where I was going. He cut her off, voice low and calm, but his words sliced like glass. Clearly. The word hit harder than she expected, quiet but sharp, like a slap. Her face flushed. It was an accident. Accidents happen when people are careless, he said. Next time, try looking before stepping into the road. Some of us have places to be. The driver shifted awkwardly. The suited man looked away. Elara's apology froze on her tongue. She'd expected anger, maybe a scolding. But the quiet contempt in his tone hurt more. Elara's apology froze on her tongue. She'd expected anger, maybe a scolding, but the quiet contempt in his tone hurt more. She took a shaky breath. Excuse me, I said I was sorry. You don't have to talk to me like that just because you are some big shot in a fancy car. His gaze flicked to her again, sharp and assessing. Watch your tone. Maybe you should watch your ego, she said before she could stop herself, her voice trembling with equal parts fear and defiance. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Someone actually murmured, "Oh, damn." His eyes widened slightly, just for a heartbeat, then he gave a faint, humorless smile. Let's go. Elara clenched her fists, pulse racing with her files clutched tight to her chest. She stared him down until his car drove away and marched away, ignoring the whispers that followed. Her chest burned, not from fear anymore, but from humiliation and anger. By the time she reached the glass tower of Blackwell Industries, her breath was ragged. The lobby gleamed with marble and chrome, a world too polished for someone who had just run through chaos. She hurried to the front desk. I'm here for the interview for the junior analyst position. Elara Myers. The receptionist's sympathetic smile told her everything before the words came. I'm so sorry, Miss Myers. The interviews for that slot ended 10 minutes ago. Please, Elara said, her voice cracking. There was an accident. I understand, the woman said gently. But they've already moved on to the next group. I really wish I could help. Elara stared, numb. The polished floor, the hum of voices, the faint echo of footsteps all blurred together. Oh, she managed. Okay. She turned away before the tears could spill. The moment she stepped outside, the city swallowed her again. She walked aimlessly, the interview folder still clutched in her shaking hands. All that work, all that hope. She'd imagined calling Bella, telling her she'd done well. Dinner that night, laughter, relief. Now all of it dissolved into nothing. Her throat tightened. She kept walking until the street noise became a dull hum. She didn't notice the man from this morning in the lobby. Inside, the same man watched her expression unreadable. His gaze lingered on the girl, the one who had stood her ground against him. Her shoulders were slumped now, her face pale. There was something oddly dissonant about seeing that fire dimmed. What was her name? He asked finally. The receptionist, who had just delivered a folder to him, blinked. That young woman? Elara Myers, sir. She, missed her interview. Arden's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He looked away from the window, expression smoothing back into control. I see, he said quietly. Theo asked, Why did you ask? He turned toward the elevator. Let's begin the meeting. But as he walked, a faint echo of her defiance stirred somewhere deep inside him, like the memory of a growl in the dark. Chapter 2. The sun hadn't yet broken the horizon when Arden Blackwell's eyes opened. He didn't need an alarm. His body worked like clockwork. Sharp, disciplined, instinctive. He lay still for a moment, staring at the faint line of light edging through the tall glass windows of his penthouse. The world below was quiet, too quiet for the city that never truly slept. But he could hear it all. The flutter of wings from a bird settling on the balcony. The faint hum of traffic miles away. a heartbeat or two in the apartment above him. Then came the low growl, deep in his chest, his wolf, restless, pacing beneath the surface. "Easy," he murmured inwardly, exhaling as he rose from the bed in one smooth motion. "It's too early for this." The beast sank back beneath his skin, restless still. It never truly slept. He moved through his morning routine like a silent symphony, every action deliberate, refined. The marble floor was cold under his bare feet as he crossed to the bathroom. The mirror fogged slightly as steam filled the air, and his reflection stared back, tall, broad-shouldered, and effortlessly composed. His hair was dark, tousled but tamed as soon as his fingers ran through it. His eyes, brown like a storm ready to break, seemed to hold something feral, barely contained. When he was done dressing, tailored charcoal suit, black shirt, silver tie, he adjusted his cufflinks, each engraved with the crest of the Blackwell family. Old blood. Ancient power. By the time he descended the stairs, the penthouse was alive with the quiet rustle of movement. His assistant, Theo, stood waiting beside the kitchen island, a tablet in hand. Theo wasn't just his assistant. He was his beta, his second-in-command in the world that humans couldn't see. "Morning," Theo said, handing him a steaming mug of black coffee. His tone was efficient, but his eyes, amber and sharp, held the same knowing awareness of the other side of their world. "Morning," Arden replied, his voice calm and commanding. Theo began his report as Arden sipped. "You have a 9 a.m. meeting with the board to discuss the new merger proposal, followed by a call with the Tokyo branch. After that, a private investor meeting at 11:30. And," Theo added with a faint smirk, "your grandmother called again. She said you've been avoiding." Arden's brow twitched. "She worries too much." Theo snorted quietly. "Only she can rattle you, Alpha." Arden gave him a sharp look. "I'm never nervous." Theo grinned. "Of course not." They finished the report, grabbed their coats, and left through the private elevator that descended straight to the underground garage. Their driver, Marco, was already waiting, a man in his 60s, loyal and calm, his silver hair neatly combed back. He'd driven for the Blackwell family for decades. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwell," Marco greeted warmly, opening the car door. Arden gave a nod of acknowledgement and slipped inside. The leather seat molded to his form as Theo joined him in the back. As soon as the doors closed, Marco steered the sleek black car onto the main road. The world outside passed in clean, calculated order, skyscrapers slicing the sky, people rushing through crosswalks, sunlight just beginning to spill between the buildings. Inside, silence reigned except for the soft rustle of papers as Arden reviewed the files Theo handed him. Every deal, every investment, every decision was executed with surgical precision. Blackwell Industries wasn't just a company, it was an empire. Then, screech. Marco's hand slammed the brakes and the car lurched forward with a jolt. Theo's hand shot out, steadying the tablet before it could fall. "What the?" They all braced themselves. The scent of burnt rubber filled the air. "Stay here," Arden said curtly, pushing the door open. His boots hit the pavement, the air cold against his face. Marco had already stepped out, visibly shaken. The front of the car had stopped just a few inches from a young woman standing frozen in the middle of the road. Her bag lay spilled open, papers fluttering around her like startled doves. I'm sorry," she stammered, kneeling to gather them, her voice trembling. "I wasn't watching where I was going." Arden's tone was calm but edged with authority. "Clearly," she froze, glancing up. Her eyes were wide, soft brown, uncertain but alive. "It was an accident," she began again, clutching her bag to her chest. "I didn't." "Accidents happen when people are careless," he interrupted smoothly, stepping closer. "Next time, try looking before you step into the road. Some of us have places to be." Her lips parted in shock. The air seemed to thicken between them. For a moment, Arden saw something flicker in her eyes, not fear, not guilt, but defiance. "Excuse me?" she said, straightening. Her voice was stronger now, trembling more with anger than fear. "You don't get to talk to me like that just because you're some big shot in a fancy car." Theo, who'd stepped out beside Marco, blinked in surprise. No one, spoke to Arden Blackwell like that? Arden tilted his head slightly, studying her. He was used to submission, to people lowering their gaze, their tone, their presence in front of him. But this human stood her ground. "Watch your tone," he said softly. His voice was even quieter now, but it held a weight that pressed against the air around them. She met his eyes and didn't back down. "Then maybe you should watch your ego." There was a collective gasp from the growing crowd nearby. Theo shifted uneasily, hiding the amused spark in his eyes. Marco looked mortified. Arden said nothing more. His jaw flexed once before he turned sharply and walked back to the car. "Let's go." The girl's breath came fast, but she stood firm until the car door shut and the vehicle pulled away. Theo watched his alpha silently as they drove off. Arden's expression was unreadable, stoic, controlled, but his eyes flickered once, just briefly, to the reflection in the rearview mirror. The girl still stood there, brushing her hair out of her face, her cheeks flushed with anger. He looked away first. By the time they reached the company headquarters, Arden had buried the moment deep beneath layers of composure. Business as usual. As he stepped out of the car, the crowd of employees straightened immediately. Heads bowed slightly in respect. He moved through them like a force of nature, cold, untouchable. But as he entered the lobby, his stride faltered, just for a second. A familiar scent drifted past, subtle, faint, but unmistakable. He turned his head. Across the lobby, the same girl from the street was walking toward the exit, her steps slow and heavy. The fire in her eyes was gone now, replaced with something else: defeat. Her hands clutched a thin file to her chest, and her lips trembled as though she was holding back tears. Theo, walking beside him, noticed too. "Isn't that Berlize?" Arden said quietly, but she didn't notice him, didn't look his way at all. She just walked out of the building and disappeared into the sunlight. Something twisted faintly in his chest: irritation, confusion, curiosity. He wasn't sure. He turned to the front desk, his voice calm. "Who was that?" The receptionist blinked, startled. Miss Elara." "She came for the junior analyst interview. She was late, sir, and unfortunately the panel already left." Arden's gaze lingered on the doors where she had disappeared. "I see." Bertheo studied him, cautious. "Why are you asking?" Arden didn't answer. He straightened his jacket and walked toward the elevators. Let the meeting begin. But as the doors closed, his mind was not on mergers or investments. It was on a pair of defiant brown eyes, and the sound of a heartbeat that had, for one strange second, refused to bow to Himber. BR Chapter 3. The Hollow's Edgebur. The rain had stopped by morning, but the sky still carried the same shade of gray that matched Elara's heart. She sat by her bedroom window, chin resting on her knees, watching droplets slide lazily from the roof's edge. The world outside looked washed clean, renewed, yet she felt anything but. The events of yesterday, the near accident, the missed interview, the sting of his words still looped in her mind like a film she couldn't turn off. "Bar, some of us have places to be," the way he'd said it, calm, cold, as if she were insignificant, made her stomach twist. And yet, what haunted her even more was the flicker in his eyes when she'd stood up to him. It wasn't just anger, it was something else, something unreadable. "Elara?" Bella's soft voice came from the doorway. "Honey, we're leaving in an hour. You packed, right?" Elara blinked and turned slightly. "Yeah, almost done." Bella lingered, smiling gently, though worry laced her eyes. "Your uncle's loading the car. This trip'll do you good, sweetheart. Your grandmother's been asking about you for weeks." "I know." Elara tried to smile, but it wobbled. "Maybe you're right. Of course I'm right." Bella crossed the room and brushed a hand through Elara's hair. "You've been beating yourself up for something that wasn't your fault. A little countryside air, family, and your grandmother's honey tea. You'll feel better." Elara wanted to believe that. She really did, but the weight in her chest refused to lift. The drive to Hollow's Edge stretched long and quiet. Alex hummed softly to the radio. Bella flipped through a worn magazine, and Liam, her cousin but brother in every way, sat with his earbuds in, staring out the window. Elara traced patterns in the fogged glass as the world outside shifted from concrete and glass to green and gold. She had forgotten how far it was. The road wound through rolling hills and dense woods until the last hint of city signal disappeared. The air changed, crisp, pine-scented, alive. Hollow's Edge wasn't just a town. It was a secret, tucked between mountains, whispered about for its woods and its stories. The kind children grew up hearing in half-believing awe. Tales of wolves that walked like men, of strange lights beneath the moon, of eyes that glowed in the dark. Elara had always laughed those off. But lately, after the dreams, it was harder to dismiss them. The dream had come again last night, clearer this time. The same forest, the same silver light. And the wolf, white as moonlight, eyes gold and fierce. But this time, she hadn't run. She had reached out. By the time they arrived, the sun was dipping low, painting the valley in honeyed gold. Hollow's Edge shimmered faintly after the rain, cobblestones gleaming, ivy crawling up brick walls, soft smoke curling from chimneys. The town looked like it belonged to another time. Her grandmother's cottage stood near the forest's edge, half wrapped in vines and wildflowers. The moment Elara stepped inside, she was greeted by the scent of herbs, wood smoke, and the faint perfume of lavender. Home, in every sense. Ah, there she is! Liana appeared from the kitchen doorway, small but commanding, silver hair tied in a loose bun. Her green eyes softened when they landed on Elara. "My little star, you look tired." Elara's throat tightened. "Just a long week." Maeve studied her for a moment that felt like forever, then nodded. "City life will do that. It takes too much and gives too little. You'll rest here. The forest will remind you who you are." The words were strange, layered with meaning Elara didn't quite understand, but they settled in her like warmth. That night after dinner, she sat by the fire as the others chatted quietly. The flames painted her face in amber, her thoughts drifting. "She's been through a lot," Bella was saying softly. "We just thought some time here might help." Liana's gaze moved from the fire to Elara, then to the dark stretch of forest beyond the window. "This town has its ways of healing," she murmured. "Even the broken find something here, though not always what they expect." Elara looked up. "You make it sound like the town's alive." Liana only smiled. "In some ways, it is." Across the winding country road, another car made its way through the mist. Arden Blackwell didn't need alarms to wake him, or excuses to drive 3 hours into the wilderness. But when his grandmother called, he answered. Evelyn Blackwell's voice had carried its usual authority over the phone. Refined, commanding, and sharp as glass. "You've been avoiding your roots, my boy. Bar, I've been running a company," he'd replied. "You've been running from yourself. There's a difference." So here he was, impeccably dressed and entirely out of place among the pines. Theo sat beside him, half smile in place, while Marco drove in silence through the mist-heavy roads. "You really think she called you all the way out here for tea?" Theo asked dryly. Bar Arden's lips twitched. "When has my grandmother ever done anything without a reason?" Bar, Theo chuckled. "Fair point." But beneath Arden's composure, something restless stirred, a faint hum beneath his skin. Bar, the wolf. It had been growing louder since the city incident. He told himself it was stress. The beast disagreed. The Blackwell estate appeared at last, stone, shadow, and grandeur carved into the mountainside. Elvin waited on the front steps, cane in hand, posture regal despite her age. "My boy," she greeted, pulling him into an embrace that somehow felt like both affection and command. "It's about time." "Grandmother," Narden said evenly. "I called because the council grows restless," she began, walking beside him. "There are whispers of a rogue wolf near the borders, and more importantly—" She paused, eyes sharp as ever. "You still have no Luna." Arden's jaw flexed. "I've told you, Yes, she waved a hand. "Too busy, no interest. The company is your only love. But we both know what that company really is, don't we?" Theo quietly looked away. Bjornlinger's gaze didn't waver. "Blackwell Industries may be our public face, but beneath it, we are wolves. We lead this territory, keep its balance. You are Alpha, Arden. You carry blood that demands equilibrium. Without a Luna, even your control will falter. Arden's tone stayed cool. I'm managing for now, she said softly, but not forever. That night the moon rose full and white above Hollow's edge, spilling silver light across the trees. Elara, fast asleep, drifted into a dream. The air outside felt electric, alive, as if the forest itself were whispering her name. She tossed beneath her blankets, then gave up, pulling on a shawl and stepping out into the night. Mist coiled around her feet. The world shimmered under the moon. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. The forest will remind you who you are. She didn't know why, but her feet carried her to the edge of the woods. Each step deepened the quiet. Each breath felt heavier. And then she saw it. A flicker between the trees, white fur, sleek, radiant under moonlight, eyes, golden unearthly, locked on hers from the shadows. Her breath hitched. The wolf, the one from her dreams, it didn't move, just stood there, watching her, powerful, silent, impossibly still, and for a heartbeat, the world stopped. Her pulse matched something ancient, something beyond words. Then, it was gone, a whisper of wind, a blur of white swallowed by the forest. Elara stood trembling, her hand pressed to her chest. She didn't know if it was real, but deep down she knew. Deep in the forest, Arden stood half-shifted, his breath fogging in the cold air. His wolf had taken control, drawn by a scent he couldn't ignore. Soft, human, familiar, something that made his wolf restless. Theo's voice crackled in his mind, the link an Alpha has with the members of his pack. Alpha? Everything all right? He didn't answer. His gaze remained on the trees where her scent lingered, wild and warm, impossible to forget. Arden exhaled slowly, muscles still taut. I thought I felt something or someone. Under that same moon, two souls brushed past each other again, unseen but inevitable, and something ancient stirred awake. Chapter 4. Whispers of Hollow's Edge. The sun was already climbing high above the pines when Elara stirred awake. Light spilled across her face through the old lace curtains, turning the dust in the air into tiny drifting stars. For a moment, she simply lay there, listening to the quiet hum of the countryside, the distant call of birds, and the faint laughter of her uncle somewhere outside. It felt so different from the city, slower, softer, like time itself took a deep breath here. She stretched lazily, rubbing the sleep from her eyes before slipping out of bed. Her feet touched the cool wooden floor, and she winced a little at the chill. After brushing her teeth and tying her hair into a loose bun, she pulled on a simple beige sweater and jeans. The air smelled faintly of dew and pine, and as she descended the old staircase, her heart felt lighter, though she didn't know why. From the hallway she could already hear the sound of plates clinking, laughter, and the low hum of voices. When she stepped into the kitchen, she found the family bustling around the long oak table. Her grandmother was standing by the counter, flipping pancakes on an old iron skillet while humming an old tune. One Elara couldn't quite place. Her aunt was slicing fruit, her uncle pouring juice into glasses, and her cousin, sleepy-eyed and disheveled, was trying to sneak bites of toast before being caught. Well, look who finally decided to join the land of the living, her uncle teased, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Elara grinned faintly, sliding into a chair. I was exhausted. That trip felt like forever. It's the mountain roads, her aunt said, handing her a plate. They twist and turn so much you'd think they were built by a drunk cartographer. Her grandmother chuckled softly, setting a plate of golden pancakes in the center of the table. Ah, don't exaggerate, child. Those roads have been the same since before I was born. And besides, she added, her sharp green eyes glinting, they keep out the wrong kind of people. Elara raised a brow. What kind of people? Her grandmother waved a hand dismissively, but there was an odd tone in her voice. The kind who don't belong here. Hollow's Edge may be small, but it has its own way of choosing who stays and who doesn't. The table grew quiet for a moment, the clinking of forks filling the space. Then, as though realizing she had made things too heavy for breakfast, Grandma Liana sighed and gave a crooked smile. You know, she began, leaning back in her chair, this town wasn't always this peaceful. There's an old legend around here, one your mother used to love when she was your age. Elara's heart tightened slightly at the mention of her mother, but she managed a small smile. A legend? Mm-hmm. Her grandmother's eyes twinkled as she spoke. It said that long before Hollow's Edge had paved streets or power lines, it was guarded by wolves. Not ordinary ones, great silent protectors of the forest. They were said to keep balance, guarding both humans and their own kind from the shadows beyond the hills. Some say they still watch over the town when the moon is full. Her cousin's eyes widened. Like werewolves? Liana chuckled. People have many names for the same mystery. Werewolves, guardians, spirits. Who knows what they really were? But whatever they were, the old folks swore they saw their eyes in the woods, glowing gold or silver depending on their mood. Her uncle rolled his eyes. Ah, Ma, you're going to give the kids nightmares again. I'm not a kid, Elara's cousin muttered under his breath. Elara smiled faintly but said nothing. She wanted to laugh it off too, yet something about her grandmother's tone, the slow, almost reverent way she spoke, sent a quiet tremor through her. Last night's dream came back to her in fragments. The forest bathed in moonlight, the soft rustle of leaves, and those eyes, impossibly bright, watching her from the dark. She hadn't been able to shake the feeling that they'd been real. Her aunt noticed the way Elara's expression shifted. Everything okay, dear? Yeah, Elara murmured, forcing a smile. Just thinking about something. Her grandmother gave her a knowing look but didn't press. It's good to think, she said gently, but not too much. Sometimes the mind is just a storyteller that doesn't know when to stop talking. They all laughed softly at that, and the heaviness lifted. Breakfast continued with the warmth of family, light teasing, the smell of syrup and coffee, and stories that drifted between the past and present. But underneath it all, Elara still felt that tug, like a quiet pulse in her chest calling her toward the forest. After breakfast, Grandma Liana clapped her hands together. All right, no moping about. You've all been cooped up too long after that long drive. We're going into town today. Elara's aunt looked up. Into town? What for? Because, her grandmother said with a mischievous grin, the market's open and I need new herbs. And maybe we'll stop by the old bakery. I heard Mira still makes those honey rolls your mother adored, Elara. Her heart softened. I'd like that. So, after cleaning up, they set off. The road that led from her grandmother's cottage wound gently downhill through rows of pine trees, their tops whispering softly in the wind. The deeper they went, the more the world around them seemed to shift, the dense forest giving way to open meadows dotted with cottages and quaint shops. A faint mist hung in the air, catching the sunlight like ribbons of silver. When they finally reached the heart of Hollow's Edge, Elara felt as if she'd stepped into a painting. The town was small but alive. Cobblestone streets lined with flower boxes, shopkeepers sweeping their storefronts, and children laughing as they chased one another past a stone fountain in the square. Despite its rustic charm, touches of modern life peeked through. A small cafe with warm light spilling from its windows, a bookstore with sleek glass doors, a few electric cars humming softly along the main street. This place looks like something out of a story. Her grandmother smiled proudly. That's the thing about Hollow's Edge. We keep the world out just enough to remember who we are. They passed a tailor's shop with linen dresses displayed in the window, a blacksmith's forge where sparks flew like fireflies, and an old bell tower that chimed softly every hour. The air smelled of pine, bread, and distant rain. "Morning, Liana," called a man from behind a stall of apples. "Morning, Hale," Grandma waved. "Still selling those sweet ones, I hope." "Only the best," he grinned. "You bringing the family for a visit again?" "Just for a bit," she replied. "My granddaughter here needed a change of scenery." Hale looked at Elara with a kind smile. "Welcome to Hollow's Edge, miss. We don't get many newcomers, but we like the ones who find their way here." Elara smiled shyly. "Thank you. It's beautiful here." The man nodded. "It's a peaceful town. Just don't go wandering too far into the forest alone, all right?" Before Elara could ask why, her grandmother steered her away gently. "Superstitions," she said lightly, though her eyes flickered toward the woods at the edge of town. "People here never quite stop believing in old stories." They spent the rest of the day weaving through the market, her aunt chatting with merchants, her cousin tasting sweets, her uncle haggling over fishing gear. Elara lingered near a small art stall, captivated by a painting of the forest at night, silvery mist curling around dark trees, and a pair of glowing eyes hidden in the brush. "You like that one?" the painter asked softly. He was an elderly man with kind eyes and paint-stained hands. Elara nodded, unable to look away. "It's haunting, but beautiful." He smiled. "That's Hollow's Edge for you. Haunting and beautiful, both at once. Sometimes the forest shows you what you need to see." Her breath caught. "What do you mean?" The old man just chuckled. "Dreams aren't always just dreams, dear. Around here, there's sometimes a beginning." Before she could ask more, her family called her over, and she reluctantly turned away from the painting. As they walked home later, the setting sun painted the hills gold and crimson. Elara walked a little behind the others, her thoughts swirling like the leaves around her feet. Every word, every glance toward the woods, every story she heard. It all pressed against something deep inside her, that same pulse again, that same whisper, "Come find me." When they reached the cottage, her grandmother put an arm around her shoulder. "You look lost in thought again, my dear." Elara smiled faintly. "It's nothing. I think I'm starting to see why Mom loved this place." Her grandmother gave her a long, knowing look before saying, "She always said Hollow's Edge has a way of finding what's missing." That night, as Elara lay in bed, she stared at the moonlight spilling across the floorboards and thought of the eyes from her dream. The forest seemed to call her again, soft and patient, just beyond the window. Somewhere out there, something, or someone, was waiting. And though she didn't understand why, she felt her heart answer. Chapter 5. The Alpha's Domain. That same day, the first light of dawn crept through the curtains of the Blackwell estate, scattering gold across marble floors, and brushing over the silent figure standing before the window. Arden was already awake. He never needed an alarm. His body obeyed an inner rhythm that no clock could command. The world outside was still heavy with mist, blanketing the valley like a living thing. He could hear it all, the birds stirring, the faint ripple of the nearby stream, and the heartbeats of his people scattered across Hollow's Edge. His senses were sharper here, alive in a way they never were in the city. He breathed in deeply. The scent of pine, damp earth, and the faint musk of wolves filled his lungs. A low growl rose from deep within his chest, not of anger but of recognition. His wolf was restless. It always was when he returned home. After a quick shower, he dressed in black trousers and a fitted charcoal shirt, rolling his sleeves just below his elbows. His reflection in the mirror stared back with quiet authority. Sharp jawline, cold eyes of steel gray that always carried a trace of something wild beneath. He combed his hair back, the motion precise, efficient. Every movement he made was calculated, not from vanity but discipline. He was, after all, the Alpha. Downstairs, the air smelled of fresh bread and herbs. His grandmother, Lady Elvin Blackwell, sat at the long wooden table, sipping tea with her usual regal composure. Though her hair was silver, her posture was straight as an arrow. Her eyes, a piercing amber, held the wisdom and ferocity of a woman who had once led the pack, herself. "Good morning, grandmother," Arden said, his tone respectful but even. "Morning, my boy," Elvain replied, her gaze lifting over the rim of her teacup. "You're awake early, as always. The city hasn't made you soft, I see." "Not yet," he replied with a faint smirk, sitting across from her. "Theo will join us shortly. We plan to inspect the grounds and ensure everything is in order before the ceremony." "Ah, yes," she said, setting her cup down with a quiet clink. "The ceremony." Her eyes lingered on him for a moment longer than necessary. "I suppose that also means the elders will begin to ask about your Luna again?" Arden's jaw tightened slightly. "They've been asking for years, and you've been avoiding the question for years," she countered smoothly. "You know as well as I do that an Alpha without a Luna creates instability. The bond strengthens not only the leader, but the pack itself. "I'm aware," he said curtly, rising from his seat. "But I will not choose Aluna out of pressure or politics." Evora's lips curved faintly. "You sound just like your father when he was your age, stubborn, proud, and alone." He paused but said nothing. The weight of her words lingered as he turned toward the door. His grandmother's voice followed him like a whisper. "Remember, Arden, power means little if it isolates you from what makes you human." Outside, the morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of rain and pine sap. The estate overlooked the heart of the pack's territory, a vast expanse of rolling hills, thick forests, and the glint of a river that snaked through it all. Below, wooden lodges and stone houses stood in orderly clusters, smoke rising from their chimneys. It was a hidden world, untouched by human eyes, cloaked by illusion and secrecy. Theo, his beta and closest friend, was already waiting near the gates, a tablet in hand. His sandy hair caught the light, and despite the seriousness in his expression, there was always a trace of humor beneath his steady demeanor. "You're up before the sun again," Theo said with a faint grin. "Do you ever sleep?" "Sleep is for those who don't have a pack of 500 wolves to keep alive," Arden replied dryly, stepping beside him. They walked together down the gravel path that led to the training grounds. Everywhere they went, people paused their work, heads bowing respectfully. Warriors training with wooden staves stopped mid-motion, eyes lowered. Mothers walking with their children whispered soft greetings, their tones reverent. Even the elders seated near the communal hall rose slightly in acknowledgement. "Alpha," they murmured as he passed. Arden gave a nod each time, small but enough. The air around him carried authority that needed no words. Yet despite the reverence, there was always a current of unease that followed him. Not fear of cruelty, but awe of power. Everyone in Hollow's Edge knew that their alpha could break a man with a flick of his wrist if needed. But they also knew he never would, not without reason. That balance of fear and trust was what kept peace. They reached the central clearing, a wide circle of packed earth surrounded by tall pines. Warriors sparred under the watchful eye of their combat leader, Brent, a broad-shouldered man with silver streaks in his dark hair. He turned when he sensed Arden's presence and bowed his head. "Alpha," he said, voice deep. "Training's been underway since dawn. The new recruits are coming along well." Arden's eyes swept over the field. "I can see that," he said, noting the clean precision in their movements. "Their discipline has improved." "Your standards have rubbed off," Brent said with a grin. "We've even got the Omegas learning defense drills now. No one's exempt from self-defense anymore." Arden nodded approvingly. "Good. Every member of this pack should be able to protect themselves. Not just the warriors. The rogues have been bold lately." Theo glanced up from his tablet. "About that," he handed it over. "We've received 3 new reports from the northern borders. Livestock slaughtered. Patrols say they caught traces of unfamiliar scent markers. Definitely rogues." Arden's expression darkened as he scanned the report. "Any casualties?" "None among ours," Theo replied, "but the farmers are shaken. The rogues are coming closer with every incident." "Rogues don't act without reason," Brent said grimly. "They're being driven, or summoned." Arden's jaw tightened, perhaps both. With the ceremony approaching, it's no coincidence. Theo glanced at him, cautious. "You think someone's planning to disrupt it?" "I think," Arden said quietly, handing the tablet back, "that there are forces that would prefer we appear weak. And weakness, during this time, would be an invitation to chaos." They walked deeper into the grounds as he spoke, passing the watchtower that overlooked the forest. From here, the territory stretched endlessly, mountains in the distance, the river glinting like glass. The heart of the pack's domain was both beautiful and dangerous, and every stone carried history. Theo broke the silence. "Do you ever wonder if peace will last? Between the packs, the humans, all of it?" Arden's gaze stayed on the horizon. "Peace is never permanent. It's something we rebuild every single day. The moment we stop, we lose everything." For a long moment they stood there in silence, Alpha and Beta, leader and brother in arms. The bond between them ran deep, forged in years of loyalty and battles fought side by side. Finally, Theo sighed. You know, the elders will keep pressing you about the Luna. The ceremony's not just about power, it's about continuity. They want assurance. Arden's tone hardened. They want control. The Luna bond is sacred. It cannot be forged out of politics. When it happens, it will be because it was meant to, not because a council demands it. Theo smirked faintly. You're romantic for someone who scares the hell out of half his pack. Arden shot him a sideways glance, but his lips curved slightly. Don't mistake principle for sentiment. Theo laughed under his breath. Whatever you say, Alpha. As the morning wore on, they continued their rounds, inspecting the borders, visiting the blacksmith's forge, watching over the young wolves in training. The hierarchy of the pack moved like a living organism, the elders, keepers of law and memory, the warriors, guardians and hunters, the betas, enforcers of order and bridge between Alpha and the pack, and the Omega ranks, caretakers, healers and craftsmen no less important than any fighter. Each member, no matter their strength, carried the mark of unity, a small silver thread bound to their wrist, symbolizing loyalty to the pack and protection by the Alphas. Oath. But despite their ranks, Arden insisted on one rule above all: every wolf must be able to defend themselves. By the time the sun climbed higher, the pack's life pulsed steadily around him. Laughter in the courtyards, the clang of metal from the forge, and the distant sound of pups playing near the creek. But beneath it all, Arden could feel a tremor in the air, faint but real. The forest seemed to be holding its breath. The wolves, his wolves, felt it too. He turned to Theo. Double the patrols tonight. I want eyes on every border. Theo frowned. You're expecting trouble? Arden's gaze lingered on the distant ridge where the forest grew darker. No, he said quietly. I'm expecting fate. Theo didn't ask further. He knew better. As they made their way back toward the estate, a wind swept through the valley, carrying with it the scent of rain and something else, something faint, almost human. Arden's wolf stirred restlessly, a low growl vibrating in his chest before he could stop it. Theo glanced sideways. What is it? Arden's eyes narrowed, scanning the trees beyond the pack's borders. For just a second, he could have sworn he felt it. A familiar pull, a whisper of something his instincts recognized but his mind couldn't place. Nothing, he finally said, though his voice had softened, distant. Just the wind. But as they disappeared into the shadows of the estate, the forest remained still, as if watching, and far beyond the border, in the quiet town of Hollow's Edge, a girl with quiet eyes and a restless heart dreamed again of wolves beneath a silver moon. Chapter 6. The Whispering Moon. The morning sunlight spilled through the thin lace curtains, warming the pale wooden floorboards of Elara's room. It was already well into the morning, the kind of golden brightness that meant she had definitely slept in. She groaned softly, blinking at the clock on the wall. Nearly 10. The house below was alive with noise. Laughter, dishes clattering, someone humming a tune that drifted up with the smell of butter and baked bread. Stretching her arms above her head, she pushed the blanket aside, sat up, and brushed her tangled hair. Her mind felt clearer today, lighter somehow, though there was still that faint ache behind her ribs, the kind that comes after too many thoughts have gone unspoken. She got dressed quickly, washed her face, brushed her teeth, and padded barefoot down the creaking stairs. The moment she reached the last step, the full life of the house unfolded before her. The kitchen looked like a warm storm of activity. Her aunt flipping pancakes at the stove, her uncle reading something from his phone, her younger cousin darting around with spoons clutched in both hands, pretending to be a knight on a mission. At the head of the table, calm amid the gentle chaos, sat Liana, her grandmother, arranging slices of fresh bread onto a woven tray. Her silver hair was tied up neatly, her eyes bright and wise, holding that quiet spark of humor Elara had always loved. Well, look who decided to join us, her father teased, glancing up. Good morning, sleepyhead. Elara grinned sheepishly. Morning. I think I overestimated my ability to wake up early. Her grandmother's laugh came soft and melodic. "You're young, dear. Sleep is still a gift you can afford. Sit, eat." She did, sliding into her chair. Her cousin, still pretending to fight imaginary dragons, almost bumped into her, and she caught his shoulder before he crashed into the jug of juice. "Hey," she said, laughing. "You'll start a war in the kitchen." "I already did," he said proudly, raising his spoon like a sword. Her grandmother chuckled. "Peace, brave knight. Breakfast first, battle later." The table smelled of warm syrup, butter, and brewed tea. For a few moments there was only the quiet rhythm of morning conversation. Small jokes, the scrape of cutlery, the steady hum of home. It felt normal, almost peaceful. Then, as Elara sipped her tea, her grandmother's voice rose again, softer now, more deliberate. "You know, tonight begins the preparations for the ceremony," Liana said. Elara frowned, looking up. "The ceremony?" Her grandmother nodded, eyes thoughtful. "The moon feast, the one I mentioned before. You must have seen the decorations starting yesterday. The whole town gathers for it every year under the full moon." Her uncle smiled faintly. "She's told that story since I was little." Liana gave her son a playful glare. "And I'll keep telling it as long as the moon rises." She turned back to Elara. "It's not just a festival. It's a memory, a story we keep alive." "Tell me again," Elara said, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I want to hear it properly this time." Her grandmother's eyes softened. She leaned back in her chair and began, her voice lowering into that measured tone she used whenever a story was worth listening to. "They say," she began, "that long ago, before Hollow's Edge was the quiet town it is now, the forests around it were untamed. The nights were darker. The winds carried howls that were not of fear but of protection. The wolves that roamed these woods weren't ordinary beasts. They were guardians, chosen by the moon herself to watch over the people." Her cousin paused mid-bite, listening wide-eyed. "Like heroes?" "Something like that," Liana said. "They would appear only when danger crept close, when storms or sickness threatened the town. And when the full moon rose, they would gather at the edge of the forest and give a single, united howl, a promise of safety. The people, in gratitude, began holding a feast each year beneath that same moon, with fires and food and laughter. It became a bond between man, beast, and the light that guided them both." Elara stirred her tea absent-mindedly. "And people still do it? Even now?" Her grandmother smiled faintly. "Every year, old traditions hold longer here than most think. They remind us where we come from, and perhaps who still watches over us." Her uncle chuckled, shaking his head. "You make it sound like the wolves will actually join the party." Liana gave a wry grin. "Well, if they ever did, I'd save them a plate." Laughter rippled around the table. Even Elara smiled, though something inside her remained curious, not fearful but strangely alert. Her grandmother clapped her hands once. "Now, enough stories. We have a busy day ahead. We need to go into town. Supplies won't buy themselves." Her cousin cheered at the thought of leaving the house, and soon enough, everyone was bustling again. Coats, scarves, shopping lists, and the familiar rush of finding misplaced wallets. The air outside was crisp and bright, carrying the faint scent of pine and hearth smoke. The path into town felt livelier than it had yesterday. People waved as they passed, recognition in their eyes now that the new visitors were no longer strangers. Some smiled and nodded, others offered polite greetings. The cobbled streets were lined with banners fluttering gently in the wind, deep blue fabric painted with silvery crescent moons. Children dashed between stalls carrying armfuls of flowers and ribbons. The whole town seemed to hum with preparation. At the market, they wove through rows of vendors selling everything from woven baskets to polished trinkets shaped like wolves. They bought flour, candles, honey, ribbons, and apples, the kind her grandmother always said tasted of sunlight. At one corner, Elara stopped to admire a stall of handmade jewelry, pendants with moonstones, small wolf charms, and intricate metal work. The woman behind the counter smiled knowingly. "For the feast, yes?" "Maybe," Elara said. They're beautiful. Careful, dear, the woman said with a wink. The moonstone sees more than it should. Her grandmother called her over. Before she could ask what that meant, and soon they were juggling shopping bags and laughter, teasing her cousin for nearly dropping the bread. By afternoon, their errands were done, and the streets had grown busier, the kind of cheerful bustle that came before celebration. The air was filled with music and the smell of roasting nuts. They walked toward the car parked near the old well, their arms full but their hearts lighter. "Let's stop a moment," her father said, setting the bags down on the car hood. "Drinks?" Her cousin cheered and her mother laughed. "You just want an excuse for lemonade." "Maybe," he admitted, grinning. They bought chilled bottles from a nearby stand, condensation dripping down the glass. Elara leaned against the car, sipping slowly as the town around them buzzed with life. Laughter, chatter, the faint echo of hammers building the bonfire frame in the square. It was simple, almost ordinary, yet somehow it felt like the kind of moment that lingers quietly in memory. The calm before something you don't yet understand. Her grandmother watched the horizon thoughtfully, the silver in her hair catching the sunlight. "Tomorrow night," she murmured, almost to herself, "the moon will be full." Elara turned to her. "And the wolves will howl?" Liana smiled faintly. "If they still remember us, dear, they will." And as the afternoon light glowed golden over Hollow's edge, the family stood together beside the car, unaware of just how close legend and reality were about to meet. Chapter 7. Run to the Moon. The first light of dawn spilled across the distant mountains, gilding the forest canopy in shades of silver and pale gold. From the balcony of his estate, Arden Blackwell stood still, bare-chested, arms folded, watching the mist drift like breath over the treetops. The wind carried scents only his kind could name: pine resin, damp earth, the faint trace of deer far beyond the ridge. The day of the run of the moon had come. From inside, the estate pulsed with quiet movement. The pack was awake. Warriors gathering, Omegas bustling about with preparations, the sound of footsteps echoing faintly against the marble halls. It was a day both sacred and dangerous, filled with unspoken tension. Even the birds seemed to hold their breath. A low, instinctive growl stirred deep within his chest. Not of anger, but acknowledgement. His wolf was awake too. Always was. He turned away from the balcony and began dressing. Every movement measured, precise, almost ritualistic. Dark trousers, the fitted black shirt, the silver insignia ring of his pack on his left hand, a symbol of protection and leadership. He caught his reflection in the mirror briefly, sharp jawline, calm gray eyes, and an expression that carried both strength and a weight he never spoke about. Downstairs, the estate was already alive with quiet motion. Guards passed silently in the hallways, bowing their heads respectfully. Servants carried trays and documents. The pack's mansion was a blend of elegance and dominance. Wide stone arches, oak beams, and ancient markings hidden subtly in the walls. He found Theo, his beta and most trusted confidant, waiting for him in the grand hall, reading through a stack of reports. "Morning, Alpha," Theo said, his voice steady but respectful. "You were up early." "I don't sleep when the air changes," Arden replied, buttoning his cuffs. "The forest is restless." Theo smirked faintly. "Or maybe you're restless." Arden shot him a sidelong look, half amused. "I'll let you decide which is worse." They began walking down the marble corridor, their footsteps echoing in quiet unison. "Preparations?" Arden asked. "Almost done," Theo replied. "The warriors have been training in rotation since last night. Patrols are doubled on the eastern ridge. We'll begin setting up the run circle by noon." Arden nodded. "Good. Keep it contained. We don't need the humans noticing." Theo sighed. "They're celebrating too, you know. The villagers down there, the moon feast. Always thought it was amusing. How they mirror our rituals without knowing what truly happens beyond the tree line." Arden allowed himself a faint smile. "Maybe it's better that way." Outside, the courtyard buzzed quietly with energy. Members of the pack moved with coordinated precision, setting up boundaries, distributing supplies, and marking protective runes in subtle patterns across the ground. Every movement, every whisper spoke of deep-rooted purpose, instinct honed through generations. The run to the moon, their sacred ceremony, was not merely tradition, it was survival, a renewal of their bond with the lunar spirit, the force that kept their instincts balanced, their humanity intact, and their wolves loyal to the oath of peace. It was also, as Arden knew, a reminder of the line they could never cross. As the sun climbed higher, he moved through the grounds, greeting elders, observing training sessions, inspecting preparations. Everywhere he went, people straightened, heads bowed low. "Alpha," they said with reverence. "Good morning, Alpha. Moon watch over you, Alpha." His presence commanded respect, but not fear born of cruelty. Arden's authority came from control, the calm kind, the kind that said, "I will protect you even if I must burn for it." Yet he saw the way some still flinched slightly when his gaze lingered too long. That primal instinct that reminded them he wasn't just a man. By mid-afternoon, the pack's warriors gathered in the clearing, a sea of disciplined faces and sharp, alert eyes. Arden stood before them, his tone even and commanding as he gave instructions. "This year's run carries heavier meaning," he began. "The moon rises stronger, and so do those who hunt without honor. Rogue movements have been reported beyond the borders. Our scouts confirmed it this morning. I want the perimeters watched alone past the 13th ridge." "You know the rules," a unified response echoed through the clearing. Low, powerful voices repeating the pack vow: "Through moonlight we rise, through blood we guard, through shadow we stand." He met Theo's gaze as the voices died down. "Keep watch tonight," Arden said, "even during the ceremony, especially then." Theo nodded. "I already have teams in place, but, if I may ask, do you think the rogues will strike?" Arden's jaw tightened. "They're drawn to weakness. The festival below will tempt them. Laughter, distraction, light. But they'll find no weakness here." Theo smirked. "Of course not. Not with you standing guard?" Arden said nothing, though a quiet storm moved beneath his composed surface. He turned back toward the forest, eyes tracing the horizon. Somewhere far beyond those hills, the human town shimmered faintly in the distance, its smoke rising in thin ribbons. He could almost feel it, like an echo brushing the edge of his consciousness, a heartbeat he didn't recognize. By evening, the estate settled into a softer rhythm, the day's wait giving way to anticipation. The air grew colder, tinged with that silvery stillness that always came before the full moon. Lanterns were lit along the halls, their glow warm and golden against the deepening dusk. Arden made his way to the West Garden, his grandmother's favorite place. He found Evelyn Blackwell, seated in her usual chair beneath the old willow tree, wrapped in a soft shawl. Her silver hair shimmered faintly under the descending light, her presence as commanding as it was tender. "Arden," she greeted, her voice warm but firm. "You're late." "I was working," he said, walking over. "Preparations, reports, patrols." "You're always working," she said with a knowing smile. "Sit, child." He obeyed, lowering himself onto the bench beside her. For a while, neither spoke. The air was too peaceful, filled only with the hum of crickets and the faint rustle of leaves. "You've done well," Evelyn said finally. "The pack thrives under your hand. The people follow you with pride. But tell me, Arden, do you feel whole?" He exhaled slowly, gaze fixed on the horizon. "Wholeness isn't a luxury I think about, grandmother. My duty is to lead, to protect." "Ah," she said softly, eyes twinkling with mischief. "Always so serious. You sound just like your father when he took the title." He gave a faint smile. "You mean stubborn." "Precisely," she said, laughing. Then her tone softened. "You've carried too much alone, my dear. Even the moon needs its reflection in the water. So does an alpha need his Luna." He sighed. "Not this again." "Yes, this again," she insisted gently. "You think I don't see it? You keep the world at arm's length, Arden. You guard the pack, the company, the borders. But who guards you?" He hesitated. "A Luna cannot be chosen out of convenience. The bond doesn't bend to will, it happens." She reached out, pinching his cheek affectionately. "Oh, I know, I may be old, but I remember. The pull of fate. I only wish you wouldn't fight it so hard." "I'm not fighting it," he said quietly. I just haven't found it. Evelyn's eyes softened. You will, and when you do, my boy, you'll understand why even the strongest alpha bows to the moon. He looked away, pretending to watch the trees. And if I never do? She smiled knowingly. Then the moon will find you anyway. She always does. They sat together in comfortable silence for a while, the warmth of her words lingering in the cool air. Beyond the estate walls, faint howls echoed across the valley, the early calls of wolves preparing for the coming night. Go, she said finally. Rest before the moon rises. You'll need your strength. Arden stood, leaning down to kiss her forehead. I promise, grandmother, he murmured. All will be well. She gave him that look. Equal parts love and mischief. I know it will, my dear. But don't think I won't remind you if it isn't. He laughed softly, the sound rare but genuine, and turned to leave. As he walked through the shadowed hallways, his footsteps quiet against the marble floor, he felt the weight of the night settling in, the balance of tradition and destiny. Above the estate, the first sliver of the moon began to rise, pale and round, watching over Hollow's Edge and the forest that surrounded it. And somewhere beyond the hills, in that little town celebrating the same moon under a different name, a young woman lifted her gaze to the same light. Neither knew it yet, but the moon had already chosen the path for them both. Theo approached again, handing him a sealed folder. Final report before the run. No rogue activity within 5 miles, but there's been movement near the eastern ridge. Arden took the file, eyes narrowing. That ridge borders the human town. Theo nodded grimly. Yes, Alpha. Could be a coincidence. Or not. Arden didn't answer immediately. He closed the file, his jaw tightening. Keep it quiet for now. We'll investigate after the ceremony. Yes, Alpha. As Theo left, Arden lingered at the edge of the courtyard, gazing toward the distant ridge where the forest thickened. Somewhere beyond those trees lay the town. Small, peaceful, blissfully unaware of the thin line separating them from the world of monsters and moonlight. His grandmother often said that the human celebration of the full moon was their way of remembering without knowing. Perhaps she was right. By evening, the estate had transformed. Torches were being lit, banners strung across the open halls. Wolves, both in human and wolf form, moved through the grounds, some laughing, some sharpening weapons, some whispering quiet prayers to the moon. The energy was electric yet heavy, a storm waiting to break. Arden found his grandmother sitting in the garden, her silver hair catching the dying light. She looked small in her chair, wrapped in a shawl, but her eyes, those wise, sharp eyes, held centuries of stories. Still working, I see, she said softly, a knowing smile tugging her lips as he approached. He knelt slightly beside her, resting his elbows on his knees. You know I can't sit still. Not today. She chuckled lightly. You take after your father in that. Never could sit still when the moon was this close. He smiled faintly. He led well. As do you. Her hand found his cheek, cool and gentle. But even the strongest alpha must have balance, my dear. You can't protect everyone alone. He looked away for a moment, the weight of leadership pressing silently on his shoulders. There's been talk among the elders, he murmured. About finding a Luna. Her smile deepened, the corners of her eyes crinkling. Ah, so you've heard me whispering to the stars again. He huffed a small laugh. You're not subtle, Grandma. She tilted her head. Neither is destiny, my boy. You may not see her now, but when the bond comes, it will be undeniable. Arden's expression softened, but carried a flicker of conflict. You make it sound simple. Oh, it's not simple at all, she said, her tone suddenly serious. But it's necessary. The pack needs both halves of the moon, strength and heart. One to lead, and one to steady the light when it wavers. He exhaled slowly, looking out toward the rising moon over the forest. The bond can't be forced. I know, she whispered with a smile, pinching his cheek lightly. That's why you'll find it when you least expect it. He laughed quietly, the sound rare but genuine. You always think you know everything. I do, she said with mock pride, then added warmly. Now go, Alpha. Your pack awaits. And remember, power means nothing without compassion." He stood, bowing his head slightly in respect before leaving her to the soft whisper of the night wind. As the moon began its ascent, silver and full, the valley filled with the howls of wolves, ancient, raw, and echoing through the land. The ceremony was about to begin. Arden stood at the highest cliff overlooking the forest, his pack assembled below, the torches flickering like a sea of fireflies. This was not just a ritual, it was remembrance, reverence, and renewal. He closed his eyes as the first howl rose deep, powerful, carried by hundreds of voices blending into one. Somewhere far beyond the forest, in the quiet little town, he could almost sense something, or someone. A flicker, faint but familiar, brushing against his mind like a whisper in the wind. His eyes opened, silver and gleaming. The moonlight washed over him, and the Alpha within answered the call. And so the run begins. Chapter 8. The Night of the Festival. By the time the sun dipped below the hills, the little town of Hollow's Edge had already transformed into something out of a storybook. Lanterns hung from every porch, glowing gold and amber like captured fireflies. Stalls lined the main street, draped in ribbons of crimson and silver. The scent of roasted apples, baked bread, and pine smoke drifted through the air, mingling with laughter and the faint hum of excitement that pulsed through the crowd. It was the night of the full moon festival, the night of the legend. Elara stood by the window of their guest house, her reflection shimmering faintly in the glass. The sound of music and chatter rose from below, a tide of life and celebration. Behind her, her grandmother, Liana, fussed with a shawl. "Come now, sweetheart," Liana said warmly, wrapping the wool around her shoulders. "You'll catch a chill before the moon even shows her face." Elara managed a small smile. "I'm fine, Grandma." Her younger cousin Milo peeked in through the door, already bouncing with energy. "Elara, hurry up! Everyone's heading to the square. Grandma says we'll miss the lighting of the bonfire." Liana chuckled. "He's right for once. Come, let's not make a habit of arriving after the blessings." They left the cottage together, joining the slow-moving crowd that funneled toward the open square at the heart of Hollow's Edge. The night was clear and sharp, the stars glinting like shards of frost. Overhead, the moon hung half-veiled behind a stretch of cloud, biding her time. When they reached the square, Elara stopped short. It was beautiful. The bonfire stood at the center, a tower of timber stacked high, encircled by woven garlands and symbols carved from old oak. The flames licked upward, golden orange, sending sparks swirling into the cold night sky. Around it, people gathered, hundreds of them, their faces lit by the flickering light, eyes gleaming with joy and awe. Children darted between stalls clutching candied apples. Men poured cider into wooden mugs. Women laughed as they tied ribbons into each other's hair. There was music too, violins, drums, and the rhythmic beat of feet on earth. "This is amazing," Elara murmured. Liana smiled, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "Every year they honor the moon and the guardians of this land. The wolves, they say, watch from the shadows, and when the full moon rises, they run." Milo's eyes went wide. "The wolves are real?" Liana chuckled. "That's what the old stories say. Whether they're real or not, well, that's for the moon to decide." Elara laughed softly, though something in her chest fluttered. The tale had always fascinated her as a child. Wolves who protected the valley, unseen but ever-present, bound by an ancient oath to the moon itself. But tonight, after the dreams she'd been having, it didn't feel like just a story anymore. They found a spot near the front where the heat from the bonfire kissed their faces. The mayor, an older man with a booming voice, stood on a raised platform speaking into the night. "Tonight," he declared, "we honor our ancestors and the guardians who walk unseen. We remember the oath of Hollow's Edge, protection, unity, and faith beneath the full moon." The crowd cheered. Elara clapped lightly, though her eyes were drawn to the tree line beyond the square, dark, whispering, almost watchful. And then, the moment came. The moon broke free from the clouds, full and luminous, its light washing the valley in silver. The forest seemed to shimmer under it, alive and breathing. A hush fell over the crowd. Then, faintly at first, came a sound, a howl. Long, deep, echoing from somewhere far within the woods. Another followed, then another, until the air itself trembled with it, a wild chorus, powerful and ancient. The hairs on Elara's arms rose. "By the gods," someone whispered behind her. Even the children fell silent as the earth seemed to thrum beneath their feet, a rhythmic, distant stomping, like paws drumming against soil. The townsfolk looked toward the forest, their eyes wide with reverence rather than fear. And then, as suddenly as it began, silence. Single final howl carried through the stillness, haunting, beautiful, and heart-wrenching. The crowd erupted into cheers, clapping and shouting with joy. The festival came alive again in a heartbeat, music soaring, laughter rising. People began to dance, toasting with cider, children waving ribbons in the moonlight. But Elara couldn't shake the feeling deep in her chest that something had answered her. She smiled faintly at her grandmother, who was laughing with the neighbors, and at Milo, who was already running toward the candy stalls. Everything was warm and alive, yet the forest at the edge of her vision pulled her like a whisper, a strange, soft tug. She didn't fight it. Quietly, she slipped away from the noise and followed the narrow path leading into the woods. The sound of the festival faded behind her, the laughter, the music, until all that remained was the whisper of leaves and the gentle rustle of her boots on the forest floor. The moonlight spilled through the branches in pale ribbons, painting everything in shades of silver and shadow. Her breath came slow. The air was cooler here, sharper, and then she saw it. Just ahead, between the trees, a figure, large, white, glimmering faintly beneath the moon. Her heart stilled. It was him, the wolf from her dreams. Time seemed to bend around the moment. The forest went still, as if holding its breath. His fur shimmered like frost, eyes a glowing amber that looked through her rather than at her. He stood there, silent, powerful, but not threatening. Elara took a trembling step forward. "It's you," she whispered. If you enjoyed this audiobook, subscribe to my channel for the second part of this book, and also more interesting audiobooks. Save the playlist for more upcoming audiobooks, and stay tuned for new audiobooks by Maple. See you next time.